Hi, I'm Clark on Temptress. Today I'm going to do something a little different. Today I'm going to go take a walk and tell stories. Oop. Gonna do something a little different today. I'm gonna take a walk. I'm gonna talk about sharks. When people hear about the life I lead, I've been out sailing since since about 2000, I guess 99 I technically went out. One of the big questions that happens at parties and such is, what about sharks? They're out here. But there's really only one country where I'm afraid of sharks. One country where I'm always concerned with sharks, let's say that way. Generally, they just ignore you. Generally, they go about their sharky business. But in the Bahamas, they have associated humans with food. There's an awful lot of people spearfishing, and the sharks have learned, at the least, if they terrorize the diver, he'll drop his fish and they get the fish. Of course, if they don't drop the fish, he might get a bit of the diver. G'day. So, it's like what they say about bears in national parks. A fed bear is a dead bear. You've got to not associate humans with food or they become very dangerous. Which in the park means they have to put the bear down. But in the ocean, you can't find one shark from another, so they just become dangerous. So anyway, I really respect and keep a distance from sharks when I'm in the Bahamas. If I'm spearfishing and I see one shark, I'm out of the water with my catch in the dinghy. I've had them come at me before. I had to decide whether to drop the fish or not, but luckily that time the dinghy was just close enough. I got it into the dinghy and got in before, but I didn't fish in that area anymore that day. That's general stories, you know. I've had hundreds of dives in the Bahamas. Most of them are shark-free. 90% of the sharks you see, particularly in the Bahamas, are called nurse sharks. And they're pretty benign. They're night hunters. So during the day, they just want to sleep. So don't molest them. Though one of my shark stories is about a nurse shark that I'll get into that later. I think I'm going to walk to the beach today. I think that might be a nice walk. What you're seeing around me, there was a lot of tourist buildup, hotels made and such. They didn't go anywhere, so they're all abandoned, which is sad for the investors. But it's what it is. Generally, this part of the Dominican Republic isn't very built up. It's kind of what you'd expect from a movie from the 50s or something. But if you go into a big city here, there's a lot going on. Hospitals and great stores, and very handy place. Very first world, more than I thought it would be. Okay, on to my shark stories. When I took scuba lessons many, many years ago, I was in Austin, Texas, and someone asked the instructor, what about sharks? And he kind of did an aside and he said, if you ever see a shark, you're the luckiest man in the world. They're just not around. You never see sharks. They're so rare. Don't worry about them. Okay, that guy was wrong. Well, many years later, I took off sailing and I'm traveling down the Pacific coast from Seattle, and I got down into the warm waters where we swam more. And he's right, never saw a shark, never saw much of anything because the visibility is really, really not great in the Pacific. That's because it's so alive. It's just so full of life, which is a good thing for the fish. And there are a lot of fish and there's a lot of sharks, and they were probably watching me the entire time, but I didn't see any. And then I went through the Panama Canal and I entered the Caribbean waters. Now, Caribbean's a whole different thing. This water has traveled over from like Africa, right under the equator. Lots of sunlight, not much land to put nitrogen and phosphorus into the water, so it's quite depleted. Still a goodly amount of life, but that little tiny life, the plankton-y stuff that you can't see through, well, not much of that. So the visibility is great in the Caribbean, and I highly recommend it for diving. So, found myself down in the San Blas Islands of Panama, also one of my favorite places ever, and I was diving. And I was diving with this French college professor who was a big spear fisherman. And, well, we kind of split up. I was with my ex-wife, Brigitte, who I was married to back then. And we were diving, just looking at fish and looking at the wonders. It was really nice. And he was, trying to get dinner. So after a couple hours, we brought the dinghy back to his area, talked to him. You see anything, Gerard? Oh no, there was nothing here. There was one French angelfish. By the way, they're like this big in the ocean. There is one French angelfish, and I think I might take him. They are good to eat, but they are pretty. And since I hadn't shot a fish before, but I was carrying my spear gun, or my Hawaiian sling actually, we agreed that I would take the fish. He'd eat it, because I don't really eat fish. But it would be fun, Well, we looked around, we couldn't find it. It had gone too. And then he said, would you like to see a sleeping shark? No, what do you call it? Yeah, a sleeping shark, or the sleeping shark. She is very safe because she has no teeth. They have teeth. So we swam along, and there was like a valley that went down to about 30 feet. And in the bottom of the valley, lying on the bottom, looking asleep, was what turned out to be the biggest nurse shark I've ever seen in my life. Was about, 8 or 9 feet long. And, that's a lot of shark. They're pretty docile though. Well, he immediately surface dove down and poked it in the back a couple times with his spear and made it kind of, wiggle, and came to the surface. And I'm looking at it going, well, I've got it on authority. I'm never going to see another shark in my life. And I've got a spear. That looks like fun. I think I'll do that. Don't do that. So I hyperventilated a bit so I could do a long dive, and went down, and I poked it in the back. Well, now it's been poked twice. It woke up. It turned at me in a menacing manner, and I decided that 30 feet straight up was too far to swim for safety with a shark that didn't like me much. So I swam to some rocks that were nearby that I could kind of get some cover, and the shark turns towards me and swims in my direction, but kind of veers off, as they do. And I'm looking at the surface saying that air looks really nice. I really want to go to the surface, but don't want to run from a predator. If you run from a predator, they chase you. Though I guess nurse sharks mostly eat lobsters. Anyway, didn't know a lot of this back then. So I'm waiting. Comes around again, and it swims off through the valley over a little hill and is gone. So I swim quickly to the surface and breathe and look down the whole time, and it was gone. So anyway, that was my first shark experience. Probably not that exciting, I guess, but it scared me. And I looked into nurse sharks a little more. Really don't mess with them. Even little bitty ones. Don't mess with them. They're not particularly aggressive, but if you bug them, they'll bite you. And they don't take a chunk. They're actually fairly weak-jawed, but they don't let go. I mean, they really don't let go. In the Keys, I've seen video of kids that molested sharks, and they bit onto their thigh, and they had to take the whole shark to the emergency room because you can't rip it off. They'll destroy your leg, but they just won't let go. They're like a bulldog. They'll drown you. So anyway, yeah, don't mess with sharks. My other story, much more interesting. It's about, oh God, 8 months later probably. We're up in a place called Providencia. That's off the coast of Nicaragua. It's technically part of Colombia, but it's far from Colombia. And they see themselves as kind of their own place. Not a very big island. It's, in fact, Providencia used to be called Providence Island. And who lived there were pirates. Probably, you know, trying to take gold from the Spanish Armada down there. Well, British went in and chased them all out of there. And when they reestablished themselves, they moved to Nassau. And that's why the island Nassau is on. It's called New Providence, because they had gone from the old Providence, Providencia. Okay, Providencia, probably about 5 miles long. It has a reef to the north that's like another 5 miles long. And decided to take the boat up into the reef. Lots of coral heads to worry about, but nobody goes there, so I wanted to go there. And there was another boat in the bay, by then pretty close friend, that also wanted to go. Strangely enough, it was the same French guy, Gerard. So we go up into there and, well, get ourselves established. Where we were anchored was interesting. It was, I gotta get off the boat more, I'm tired. Walking in sand is exhausting. I'll slow down. Well, we were anchored behind a reef, a tall reef that kind of made the breakwall. Outside of that reef, it was, you know, really deep ocean water. But inside it was about 10 feet deep, probably. Like I said, lots of coral heads, but lots of sand too. And we anchored down. There was 20-25 knots of wind blowing across us, the trade winds, you know. But we were in smooth water behind the reef. Of course, the reef had 8-foot waves breaking on it constantly, so it was a lively place. But we were safe. We got ourselves settled in, made sure the anchors held, and decided we got to go for a dive. So we so we took the dinghies out, went a little bit north to a break in the reef. Gerard had this idea that pelagic fish from the ocean, would come in to have lunch off the beach, you know, and they would come through that break and have a little snack, go back out. So he could hang in the break and he'd be able to do some spearfishing. And like I said, we didn't really eat fish, so we just went sport diving, you know. One of the things I did was Brigitte and I, because the water was so fantastically clear, it was, I don't even know, like over 100-foot visibility. It just went on, and it was like looking through air. So I had this idea. What would it be like to swim out over the wall into the open ocean? It was like 1,000 feet deep on that wall. And I wanted to know if I would get vertigo, you know? Would this be scary? So I told Gerard, he's a responsible guy, said, we're gonna go do this. We're gonna be back in 15 minutes. And we will be back in 15 minutes. If we're not back for 16 minutes, please come and try to find us because the current got us. You know, it's a little dangerous doing that. So we went out, and it was weird. It's like hang gliding or something. The land just went away, and it just got so deep, but you could see so far. Yeah, no vertigo. Something about being supported by the ocean just makes you feel safe. So swam around, swam back in, told them we're gonna go more sport diving. We go in and we're diving around and we see lots of nurse sharks just everywhere. I mean, they're common, but in this case, they were like in your mask view, there would be like 3 at any time. It's just more than I've seen before. I guess there's lots of lobster there too, so the nurse sharks are happy. The locals say, why are you going up there? Boy, there's nothing but lobsters and sharks. And there were. So, came back in, did some more diving, had a nice afternoon. And then we decided we had enough. And my ex-wife, Brigitte, she's a tiny little girl. She's 5'4", weighed 105 pounds, and she would get her exercise by getting up in the morning and going to the beach and running in the sand. Well, I'm closer to 200 pounds. I don't run in the heat. So how I got my exercise was at the end of these dives, I would swim very aggressively back to the dinghy. Now, sometimes she would follow, and sometimes she would just hang out watching the fish and wait for me to come pick her up. By this time in the cruise, she was a very competent diver and swimmer, so no worries about her. And we decided it was time, so off I went. And I got to the dinghy, and I'm at the transom of the dinghy, about to pull myself up. At the time, I had what's called a porta boat. We do a video on one of them. They're made out of polypropylene and they fold up. So not a very substantial boat, but a great little boat. I recommend one if it meets your needs. Okay, so I'm at the transom of the boat, breathing through my snorkel at mask depth. Realize I'm like a horse with blinders. I'm wearing a mask, it's covering my face. And I just about to pull up. And the only way I can describe it is I felt a malevolent loam of evil behind me. So instead of getting in the dinghy, I just turned underwater and looked through that clear water, and I saw the biggest shark I've ever seen. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but I took notes, got the fish book out later on. Turned out it was mako shark, big mako shark. I had estimated its length and its weight in the water. I had estimated 1,000 pounds because I grew up with cows, the size of its body and the cow and everything. And but I knew I was more accurate with length. And then I looked the length up in the book, and it said it would have been a 600-pound mako shark. Still plenty. That guy could have taken me into his mouth without touching a tooth, but I doubt that would have been his plan. And it has those, I don't know, the rows and rows of teeth. Look one up. They're scary, scary fish. Normally, the interaction with mako sharks and people is rare. They're a pelagic shark. They don't hang out at the beach. This guy came in for lunch probably. In fact, when there is interaction between humans and mako sharks, it often goes like this. Somebody will be out tuna fishing, and they'll catch a tuna and they'll be bringing it aboard, and the mako will see this wounded tuna and say, I'm gonna have that. But they get it in the boat early. And the shark looks at the boat, thinks about the tuna and says, I can rip the transom right off that boat and I can eat that tuna, and maybe the guys too. And they do. These are equipped to do this. They actually attack boats, small boats. Well, big enough boat to go out in the ocean and get a tuna. So they're very mean. Don't mess with them, sharks. It's just that they don't hang out at the beach where humans hang out. So you don't hear about them so much. Okay, back to him. So there he is. And he's swimming in my direction and definitely notices me. I grew up on a farm, and I was told as a little kid, about dogs and stuff. Don't run from predators. Stand your ground, they'll back off. If you run your prey, they have to bite you. So I just stayed in the water, didn't get in the dinghy. Wasn't much of a protection in that dinghy. And I just looked at him as he came through the water. And he's coming. Not in any hurry. And lots of teeth. But the scariest thing is the eyes. Let me remind you of that original Jaws movie. I think it's Burgess Meredith, the old guy. He was telling a story when he was in that boat that went down during World War II, and so many people got eaten by sharks. He said, it's the eyes, I tell you. They got doll's eyes. It's the eyes. If he had eyes with whites around them, I could tell what's going on in his brain maybe. I could communicate somehow. I could say he's looking at me, then I would know. I could say he's looking over there at this rock or this other thing, then I would know he doesn't care about me. But with these cold, staring, black eyes, it was terrifying. And he's getting bigger as he comes, and he's coming. And it's like, what do I do? Can't get out into the dinghy now because I'll make a big splash doing it, and that wouldn't be good. So I just held my ground, looked at him, and then I got this idea. I don't know if it'll work. I don't believe in this kind of thing, but what the hell? Oh, bull doesn't like me here. I would look at him and vibe at him that I'm the nastiest thing in this ocean, that I'll mess you up. Pretty pathetic, 200 pounds of me and 600 pounds of him, but I did it. I stared him down and he came at me and he missed, went by me, probably always intended to, by about 30 feet and kept swimming on. Well, I got out of the water and I scrambled forward to the front of the dinghy and got the anchor up. And as I was coming back to start the engine, there's Brigida. That's good because I was going to have to go find her, but she's hanging out like you would. And I said, please get in the dinghy. What? Why? She see me flop around with fins on still and a mask. We eventually got divorced, but we never fought. And it was the only time I ever raised my voice to her. I said, do exactly what I say, Brigida, get in the dinghy right now. And of course she did. And she was happy for the warning later when she heard the story. So I got the engine started. I take my mask off. She wants to hear the story. Why did this happen? I tell her. And I'm up on plane now going. And she's responded with, shouldn't we be going back to Temptress? The big boat. Well, I pointed out that our friend Gerard is in that break in the reef that the shark's going for, likely with a string of dead, bloody fish that he had speared. And we really got to go tell him what's going on. So we did. And he prudently got out of the water and finished his dive. He had gotten 2 good big fish. We went back to our boats and, did the things you do afterwards and rested. And he had cleaned his fish, and I'll get back to that in a while. So that night, we're on his boat, had a few drinks and chatting, and you know, it's getting dark. It's clear, starry night, but all the time it's blowing 25 knots, and every few seconds there's an 8-foot wave crashing on the reef, not 30 yards from us. But we're used to it by now. Okay, we had our night, and he invited us for breakfast the next morning. We all went back. Next morning we went back to his boat. He's down there cooking us eggs, and we're talking, and I noticed his Genoa sheet. Now that's the rope that controls the head sails. Big rope on his boat, probably 3/4 inch. So it's not in good shape. It's all shredded at the end. And I kind of teased him about it. You know, you got to take better care of your lines. I'll have to show you how to do a whipping. And he turns off frying pan, comes up and tells us his story of the night before. Well, after he cleaned his fish, he took the carcasses, grabbed any handy line, turned out to be his Genoa sheet, ran it through the heads and out the gills of, you know, there's no meat on them, but there's still lots of fish, and threw it in the water behind his boat, tied it off to the main cleat, you know, that you would dock with. Very strong gear. And nothing happened. Those fish were in the water while we were there the night before. Nothing was happening. So he goes to bed for out of bounds. Middle of the night, he's woken up with his 47-foot boat pitching. Not rolling, pitching. Nose up, nose down. Violently. Enough to wake him up. So he crawls out of bed. He scampers up on deck and looks around because he thinks he's drug off his anchor and, you know, bad things are happening. He looks around and trying to make sense of it, and he says, well, I look at your boat, I see your anchor light not moving with the stars and right where it's supposed to be. So I know I haven't moved because relatively it's the same. And I know I'm not dragging, but I'm still trying to figure it out. Very confused. So he goes back to the cockpit to think, figure out what's going on. And then he finds out what's going on. Something large, probably something like that Mako, had gone for the fish and got that rope in his teeth and was not going to give up the fish. So he's throwing this 47-foot boat around like a bath toy. And he's been doing it for a while for all this to have happened. And eventually he just saws through the Dacron line and you know, makes off with the fish. But these things are powerful is my point. Anyway, I'm almost back to the boat. That's my shark stories. I don't think you have a lot to worry about them unless you're in the Bahamas or a place where they feed sharks. If you're ever in a tourist place where they feed sharks, don't deal with the sharks there. They associate humans with food. They've lost their fear. But generally, sharks are probably very wary of humans, and they probably wouldn't mess with you. They just don't know if you're dangerous to them or not. You could be poisoned. So I say swim, enjoy the ocean, and you never really hear about anybody getting bitten by a shark out in this life unless they're spearfishing, and unless they're spearfishing in the Bahamas. In which case, yeah, I've talked to locals and they'll pull up their pant leg and show me the scars. It's real. It happens. Guess that's all my stories. And I guess I'll leave you guys. If you like stories, tell me. I can do another story video. Not too hard to do, really. Got lots of stories. Bye from Temptress.